Welcome back to the Milwaukee Market Update. We're covering real estate news and data and breaking it down to help you understand how it impacts your real estate decisions. Teaser: how to buy a home in 2026 in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yep, let's dive into it. Today we are breaking down if buying a home is a goal for you this year, what you can start doing today. We're talking about the timeline for when you should start. What are kind of those first steps to get your finances, that initial search in order, how to find a realtor, and also what can you expect with this market and the process once you're actually in that home search part of your process.
Awesome. We're here to give you the info you need to make the right decisions regarding your real estate. Should I buy a home now? Should I be selling? Is the housing market about to crash? Are these headlines I'm reading, content I'm seeing on social media true or even relevant to me?
If you're new to the show or if you're returning, first off, if you're a returning listener, thank you for listening. But it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe wherever it is you're listening to our podcast. Helps us out immensely and gets our reach and audience a lot more larger to help anyone that might be buying or selling a home this year. You can follow us on Instagram, Horizon Homes MKE, or reach out on our website, homewithhorizon.com.
I'm Ty
I'm Nick.
with Compass, your local real estate experts.
Hey, Ty, well, exciting episode here. Last week we talked about kind of what our predictions are for the year and also kind of just a recap of what 2025 brought us. I think the start of the year, it's always a good time where a lot of people are looking at what's their goals. What do they want to do this year, new me. Maybe it's going to the gym, maybe it's losing some weight, eating healthier. But I think a lot of people too have the goal of buying a house. And I think a lot of people go, you know what? This is the year that I'm going to buy that house and I'm going to do it, whether it's a first house or moving out. So let's talk about that. Let's talk today about kind of if you want to buy a house this year, what are some things that you can start doing today, kind of how to just high level start getting an idea of how can we make that dream a reality for you.
Yeah, let's make the punch list of essentially post-COVID era, the last 5 years. Like, what do you need to do to make sure that, like, when you find the perfect home, like, I'm ready to go? This isn't going to be all the steps. It's just like, what do you need to start knocking out here at the beginning of the year to have that goal become a reality by the end of the year?
I love it, man. Um, just take us away, man. Start this off here. Like, if someone goes to you or you're thinking about buying a house this year, like, what are kind of maybe the first one or two things that you kind of want to understand if you're in that situation?
I think for me as the agent, the thing I want to most understand is like, what are you looking for? Have you started doing some discovery, like open houses, like window shopping? Like, what are you looking for? Because eventually the conversation is going to lead to like, are you going to be successful? Like, does that exist? I think is one of the primary questions people have is like, is it realistic that I can actually buy a home? And the second one being like, what are like kind of like a few of the high level financial pieces behind the scene of like, how much money do I have to buy a house? Like the simplest question without getting into the verbiage of down payment, everything else. It's like, how much does it take to buy a house? Because I'm sure
Yeah,
there's other things I'm not thinking of from like a cost perspective.
yeah, I agree. I think like the two things that everyone probably has in their mind is number one, the money. Like that's
Mhm.
probably the most important piece is the money. Let's talk about that. And then also I think too, the timeline is really
Mhm.
important to kind of understand of like, and we can talk about that. But I kind of think like the two most important things, the money and the timeline. And if we talk money here, I think the number one is always like saving up for that down payment is typically the number one. And if there's a target to kind of reach, typically the lowest amount down is 3.5% of that purchase price of the house. Um, but you also see buckets of 5% down,
Mhm.
10% down, 20% down. I could generally see as long as you're at that 5% down range, you've got options to purchase. Three and a
Mhm.
half, you have some options, not as many. But I kind of think that's like if you're thinking about what does my bank account need to get to for me to be in a position to buy a house, 5% is kind of like the starting entry point, I
Mhm.
would say.
Yeah. And for the typical home here in Milwaukee, that's 380 to $400,000. You're talking about $20,000 just for the down payment. There's other costs that we'll talk about in a second, but if you don't have $20,000 roughly, like you might need to keep on saving a little bit more, but we can literally give you the answer to like based on what you want, where you want to live, like roughly here's how much money you should be working towards saving up.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing too is the timeline. Because I think most clients that I'm working with that are first time home buyers, they're renting and they have a lease that is coming up at some point. You know, I think most
Hmm.
leases are probably going to be between June to September is kind of when that big lease renewal timeline happens. And I think the timing of when you start this is really important as well too, because you can. I don't think there's such a thing as starting too early. You know, maybe if you're like 2 years out, that might be starting a bit too early. But there is
Yeah.
definitely a thing of starting too late, where if you start this process a month before your lease is up for expiration, you're not really giving yourself a lot of options. So kind of tell me more about like timing and kind of how you think about that as well too.
Yeah, I think the overview I like to give anyone who's going from like the rent to trying to own situation in today's market where the sellers hold a lot of the cards, it's competitive for buyers going against each other. The only like advantage you have is time of waiting for the right window of opportunity, the right home, maybe a gap in activity because it's a holiday weekend. Like having your search consolidated to a short amount of time could put you in a position where you don't have the leverage you want further down the road. So from a timeline perspective, I really think that like 3 months is kind of the sweet spot, especially when you're looking at a lease situation, because a lot of people have to give like a 60-day notice in terms of rental renewal to their property manager or landlord. So like that's like a sweet spot because like if you're like motivated, this is your number one goal, you know you've got a time frame, like you could find a home in 30 days. And if you're like hitting the ground running, you're following the advice we have. But in all honesty, if your lease is expiring in like April, May, you probably need to be getting rolling now in January, February, because you're going to start getting a little bit too close. You then have your home inspection. Oh my gosh, is it going to go well? Do I give notice or do I not give notice? Am I going to be homeless? There's all these different things that to
Yeah,
balance. Like 3 to 4 months is perfect.
I totally agree with you, man. Because I think too, like once you get accepted offer, standard closing timeline will say 30 days. Can be sooner,
Yep.
can be longer, but 30 days. So right there, if your lease is up at the end of July, the soonest or the, excuse me, the latest you'd probably want to submit an offer, absolute latest is July 1st. And that's really, really pushing it, like really
That's way
pushing
too
it.
late. Yeah.
That's way too late. But if you kind of work backwards from there, that there's a 30-day timeline from accepted offer to closing, you probably want to give yourself a couple weeks or a month to move.
Hmm.
Um, and then also, if you backtrack from there, then you can. I kind of typically see that it takes maybe 30 to 90 days to find that house. Kind of like
Yep.
around 45 ish days tends to be the timeline. So that's anywhere from 3 to 4 months before, which is
Hmm.
exactly what you just said. And I cannot agree more with you
Yeah.
too, that you want to give yourself that time to find the right house. And I think that's probably one of the most important things too, is just like when should you start. And I think like 4 to 5 months before a lease renewal is really that
Hmm.
crunch time to kind of build your team, get your ducks in a row with your lender and your mortgage and everything like that. Find the realtor you want to work with that can guide you through what to start doing. Um,
It's the tug of war you're at here is getting something earlier and carrying your mortgage and your rent for an extra month versus trying to time it down to the very last minute because you can't or don't want to balance it. Like you will cause more stretch if you go closer to the I'm going to get this at the last minute so I can have like that perfect overlap where I only have one or no payments for 1 month because the mortgages are done in arrears. If you can open up that financial flexibility where it's like if I can find the right home and it's a little bit early, that's okay. That's the optimal position to be in.
I agree, because you also don't want to be making a decision with your back against a wall where I have to have this house work because if not, I don't have any other options and I'm back to renting. And that's a really tough spot to be in. We don't want a client or anyone making a decision out of a necessity. We wanted them to be making a decision because they want to make that, not because they
Mhm.
have to make that.
Yeah. And the other tactical thing that you might want to talk to your landlord about is like if you have a lease that's ending in spring, ask them about month to month. Ask them, hey, if I renew, I'm looking to buy a home now. What's your break lease policy? And like, what are the months I can do it? I would say most have like you have to pay an extra month's rent to break your lease during the months of like March to August. Understand what those policies are. Like, it's just a part of the total picture here. Don't pass up on the perfect home or like the right timing or wait for an entire another year just because like oh I've signed my lease and there's no other options. Like explore your options because they usually exist, especially if you're working with like a mom and pop
Hmm.
landlord or the opposite end, a huge apartment building. It's like they have people coming in every single day looking to rent. they're going to have options. You just have to
Yep.
explore them proactively.
Yeah, and you have to have that conversation with them. It's easier to get in front of that than it is to be to be the
Hey, I got an
opposite of
accepted offer. Can I move
proactive.
out in 20 days?
Right.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. Be
Exactly.
proactive, be open about it, and they're going to have options for you and negotiate it. That's definitely a big part of it.
Yeah, cool. Um, should we talk about the market a little bit of someone that's maybe like thinking about buying a house, just like what they could expect to get
Mhm.
into? Or should we, is there anything else you kind of think is worth mentioning here also?
I've got a couple questions for you that people might be curious about. I think the very first one that everyone's very fixated on that's related to the market is interest rates. Right now, rates are about 6%. This a 6% floor? Have we settled into this 5.8 to 6.3% range? Or do we think they're ever going to be getting down to 3%? And should I keep waiting? I mean, now that we've got rates going down, what should I do?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard question to answer.
Yeah.
And I think it depends on each person's unique situation of what's important for them. I think if you are waiting for rates to get to that perfect spot and that perfect number, is there ever going to be a perfect number that works for you? You know, like if it's 3%, if it's 2.5, if it's 4, like then is it going to be okay, actually now it's 3? Like so I think that's one question to ask yourself is like what's more important? Is it waiting for rates to get to where I'm happy with it, or is it me buying a house? And there's no right or wrong answer to that. My prediction is we're probably going to see rates be between 5.7 to 6.5 the rest of this year.
Hmm.
So I think we'll see some ebbs and flows, but I don't think it's realistic to think that all of a sudden we're going to see rates in the 3s or 4s anytime this year. I also don't think we're going to see rates get back in the 7s or 8s anytime this year.
Yeah.
And I've been wrong before, so who knows? But I think it's going to be right around that number. And I think it's comes down to then, are you okay with that? Does that fit your budget and what you can look for and what you're happy with? And if so, great. If not, then maybe it does make sense to wait and see what happens. But I think if you're waiting for rates to get back to where they were in the COVID era of 3%, I don't know if we're ever going to see that again in our lifetime,
I'd
unfortunately.
be very careful waiting. And I think like the one thing I'd say overall is it's about budget, what you hit. Rate impacts that for sure, but you can also keep on saving that down payment to help reduce that payment further. If you wait for another 2 or 3 years, hoping and cross your fingers rates to go down, which seems unlikely at this point, you may see something similar to what happened in Milwaukee already, which was like 2020 all the way, or sorry, 2022 till this year, we've seen prices go from 250 to $380,000. So be very careful because we have a very similar market dynamic right now of low inventory, pretty strong demand. You might see that go from 380 to 450
Yep.
as like typical home price. Is that a bigger risk, or is it a bigger risk of you growing into your payments over time through working harder at your job, saving a little bit more down payment? There's a lot of options to like smooth that payment out. So like, what's worse for you? Is it
Right.
saving 15, five to $15,000 more money and wait 2 more years and now you're paying a higher entry price, or is it the being a little bit strapped in the short term, making sure that your reserves in a good spot? That's
Yeah.
a personal finance decision all day.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. And I kind of hate the realtors that say date the rate, marry the home, or whatever that slogan is, because I don't think that's actually advice. You know, like
Yeah,
that's not
it's,
advice.
it's
Like
cringy.
it's very cringy. Yeah. And it's like there's no right answer for any one situation because everyone's situation is different and everyone's goals are different. And it comes down
Mhm.
to what you're okay with personally versus not.
Yeah.
I think you summed it up very well as far as like waiting and what that could look like. Rates could drop, you know, like it could be beneficial. It might not be. So it comes down to kind of what you want to do and what's important for you in your situation.
Definitely. The next thing in terms of like, do I wait or not? A lot of people are waiting because of the next piece, which is competition. Here are like two national headlines going on. I'm curious to get like your take of like what that actually means locally. The first one, these are the headers, the inventory shift, as well as the have and the have nots. Those are like two things in terms of like market dynamics and competition is there's a lot more sales signs out there nationally speaking. How does that relate here in Milwaukee? And also, there's a lot of cash flying around out there. And how do I be competitive as a first time home buyer? What are we seeing here in Milwaukee from a inventory as well as like a can I ever beat all these cash buyers that are out there right now?
Yeah. And I think that's a good question of just like what's the market look like right now too.
Hmm.
And we got to talk also about like, okay, you do want to buy a house, you got your finances in order, you got your timeline. What happens after that? We kind of glossed over that, so we'll
Yeah.
be sure to wrap up with
We'll
that.
circle back. Yeah.
Yeah. But to answer this question, I think the Milwaukee market right now, it's very competitive for buyers. Especially at the price point between, let's call it 250 to 500, kind of that first time home buyer price point. I just listed a house today. It's in Cudahy, listed at 270,000. Great first time home buyer price point. Great first time home buyer home, 3-bed, 1.5-bath ranch. I think we have 17 tours between today
Holy cow.
and tomorrow. And so, and it's under 20 degrees today. Those are people that are serious about buying a house. Those probably aren't tire kickers that are wanting to go out in the freezing cold to look at homes. Those are people that are committed to buying houses. And that's kind of just a glimpse of what the market looks like right now. Like, it's very competitive for buyers. So I think, and I don't see that changing. I think that's kind of what your question was, is like, is this going to change? If I wait, will this change? It might. We're seeing signals in some markets that it is now turning into a buyer's market where buyers have more competition. We're seeing signals of inventory rising in some markets. We're seeing signals of prices going down in some markets. We're not seeing that in Milwaukee. I like the metric of months of supply, measures supply and demand. A balanced market means we have 4 to 6 months of supply, meaning it's going to take 4 months to 6 months for all the homes to sell if no new homes get listed. Right now, we're at 2.5.
We're just under 2 because not a lot of inventory has come back onto the market. I think we're down at 1.8 months of supply in December. Like, it is a lot of pent up inventory will come. We'll probably see a big rebound here in January of that kind of flip over to the mid to low 2s again. But that's still very much a seller's market. So I agree. The inventory story that's out there nationally is the exact opposite. Flip that on its head here in Milwaukee. You're not going to see, I think, the multiple offer bidding war end in Milwaukee this year.
Agreed. I agreed. And I think it's going to be very similar. I think we'll see a little bit uptick of new listings to kind of help that. But I think it's still going to be kind of like what we saw last year, and what we're starting to see this year is a lot of competition for buyers.
And if you want all of our predictions on the market, listen to the last episode.
We went
into real in the weeds, like exactly what our predictions are. And I think it'd be helpful to see like what can I expect, because if you are thinking of waiting, just take our predictions. And I think so far we've proven, if you use just a couple things like month of supply and starting inventory levels for the year, it's pretty predictable at a very local level of just Milwaukee to know where are we headed from a price growth perspective. And then we're expecting more price growth.
I think too, we have half the number of homes for sale as we should to be in a balanced market. And I think that's kind of the main takeaway that I like to talk about is we need double the number of homes listed for sale. And that could happen, but double is a lot. You know, that's a lot of homes to get to that point. So I don't think we're going to see a change.
And especially this is the storyline that happens. Inventory doubles in Milwaukee. Is the end finally here? Is this the end of the housing market? Will we see 2018 prices? You know, will we see $200,000 fall? Like, you're not going to be like, oh great, there's all this inventory now and it's a lot easier to buy. It's like this inverse reality where you think you're going to be more aggressive and risk on than that you actually are, versus like what we have in Milwaukee, which is a very stable, predictable market that you can kind of forecast out a little bit of like, if I wait a year, what's this going to kind of look like? Does that make sense? And those are all things that a realtor kind of help you piece together along with your lender. So,
and I think it'd be good if we had double the amount of inventory. It'd make this market more balanced. Like, I think we'll kind of talk about next steps for a buyer, but it's not easy buying a house right now. Like, and you've got to really be committed. And I talk to a lot of clients too about, I want to preserve your energy, because the first time we meet, we look at a couple houses, you're going to be very excited. You're going to have your coffee in hand. You're going to be feeling good. The next time we go to see houses, vibes are a little bit lower. And then the next time, you're starting to think, are we ever going to find a house? And I try to really preserve that energy for my clients to be sure that we're looking at the right homes that they're going to like. So they're not spending their time, effort, energy, excitement, getting their hopes up, because it's a grind. It can be, at least. And so I think, but I would love to see inventory double, because that means we've got not 3 days on market for a good house. We've got 15 to 20. You're not
options. Seeing 1 or 2 homes in a weekend. You can see a few different options, a couple different markets. Wait till Monday to like really let it soak in and figure out what you want. Yeah, definitely agree. So we've kind of hit a little bit on general timeline, right? 3 to 4 months is ideal, especially if you're moving from renting to owning. Honestly, that's about how long it takes to do the buy your next home and sell your home too. 3 to 4 months is a great like kind of sweet spot window. We talked roughly about like how much money you need if you're buying your first home. You need at least 5% down. There's some lower options. You can obviously put more if you've got it, and certainly we'd advise you to do that to, ease the effects of the interest rates. And we generally know that the market is different than what we're seeing across the country here. What's like the punch list right now for your buyer that's saying 2026, I'm going to buy a home? Nick, what do I do? Just hit me with your list.
Yep. I would understand where you want to be, location. That's
Location.
number one. So, what neighborhoods do you like? What do you not like? Number two, I would understand. Go on, just type in mortgage calculator. If I can put this much down and I want to pay this much, what does that equate to in a purchase price? And that's going to be very helpful for you to understand your monthly payment, what that looks like for a purchase price. So
And
understand
don't
location.
forget, yeah.
Go ahead.
And don't forget taxes, insurance, and if you're doing less than 20% down, private mortgage insurance. Some
Yep.
calculators don't include homeowners insurance or private mortgage insurance. Just make sure you're putting all those. The acronym is PITI, so principal, interest, taxes, insurance, and PMI. Make sure you get those in.
Yep.
So location, budget.
Budget. So now you've got essentially where you want to be. You've got a price range of what you can afford. And then I think from there, that like helps you just understand what areas can I be in? What can I not be in? What kind of homes can I get at that price range? I would start doing kind of the window shopping. Go on
Yep.
Zillow, go on realtor.com, go on compass.com, and just start looking at houses in your price range and getting a good idea of where those are, what kind of homes those are, and just kind of have that conversation with yourself of, does this fit what I want? Like, do I like this? Do I like this kind
Yep.
of house with this bed and bath configuration? And I would just start absorbing. I would just start looking, just kind of window shopping, just getting a general gist of, okay, what is in my price range and in my areas that I can start kind of just taking this all in at a very high level from a search perspective.
Yeah, totally agree. And now that you've got location, budget, that window shopping, it's probably time to like start having that conversation with the lender. The last time you want to be reaching out to your lender is when you've like found the perfect home and now they're asking you for like open book of everything that you have about yourself financially speaking, and there's a lot of documents, and just like it's kind of just a pain in the butt to go get all the stuff the lender needs. Do it proactively, because they can also like suss out some of those like gotchas, or like, hey, you need to go clean up this credit card, you need to go do this in order to get to this budget. Start having those conversations with your lender, loan broker, local credit union, and feel free to talk to a couple options too. Almost no one's going to give you your like, here's the rate you're going to get, because that changes like by the hour, by the day. But they can certainly give you like, if you got an accepted offer today, here's where our pricing would be.
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's also probably worth connecting with a realtor also at that point too. You've done your search, you've kind of looked at houses. Kind of what I see is a trigger for someone to reach out to a realtor is they've done all these steps. Maybe they've connected with a lender, maybe they haven't, but they know they should. But then they're on Zillow and then they see that house that pops up that they're finally like, oh, this is the one that I really like. I want to go see this. And that kind of is what triggers a lot of time for that realtor connection.
Mm-hmm.
Let's kind of talk about that real quick. There's a couple different ways to find a realtor. What would you advise here, Ty?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think one of the best ways to find a realtor is to talk to one of your friends or family members that own a home. And hey, did you have a realtor that you really enjoyed, that you thought had your best interest throughout the entire process? Like, getting a referral from a friend or family member, I think, is excellent. I think the second, like, most growing in popularity is just searching online, not necessarily through Zillow, but like looking at Google reviews, or in some cases, we're seeing more and more people do more specific needs for like research in AI, like ChatGPT or Gemini, and just saying like, hey, this is me. Like, can you find people that are maybe a little bit more like me that I'm going to vibe with? Because part of this is like the ability to do the job as a realtor. The other part is like enjoying your time with that person, going to homes, talking about negotiation and like high pressure things, like making sure there's going to be a good personality fit for you too. So
Yep.
like those I think are like the easiest ones. I lean a little bit less against like, oh, I just found this home online, I clicked a button and like, let's get luck of the draw for somebody that threw some money Zillow's way. to like get a connection to you. Like that is the third option. I'm sure you could talk a little bit more about.
I agree. I totally agree with you too. And I think you almost don't want to wait until you have that right home to find your realtor. Because then a lot of times what happens is you're kind of scrambling. You're trying to go and see this. You're doing all these phone calls, referrals. You're trying to move really quick. And then what ends up happening is you find that realtor on Zillow. And like you might have a phenomenal experience with them. You may not have a phenomenal experience with them, you know? So I think once you kind of know that location, that price range, you're happy with the inventory you're seeing, I think that's probably the best time to just start looking, researching for realtors, having a couple phone calls, chatting with a couple of them, interviewing them. And like you mentioned, understand first off like who you vibe with and who you think is going to be enjoyable to work with, but also someone that you trust, that you know is going to get the job done for you, have your best interest at heart. But yeah, I think that's kind of
And
what to
I
say
think it's
there.
important, like if people are going to interview agents, I think here's some important questions. One is like, have you sold homes like what I'm looking for here in this area? Like, are you experienced in the local market? Is one of the very first questions. You might get a variety of response there. I think the next one is, are you going to be able to support me? Like, I know that you're human and you're a realtor, you're not a robot. Like, if you're out of town, how does like, if the perfect home comes up on a Saturday night, like, how am I going to be able to go see that? Like, making sure that your realtor isn't going to be the bottleneck in your home shopping journey, I think is another good one. Those are like good, feel it out. Like, hey, do you know this area? Or also like, are you actually going to be available to show me the home? What's your process? When are you actually going to be like working hours? Most realtors are going to be like, all the time. I never take vacation. This is the only thing I do. And unfortunately, like that's not the way it works. People live real lives. So making sure that they actually have a system and a process of like how to have coverage when
Hmm.
life happens on the realtor side.
I think that's so
What
important.
what how about you? Any
I
other
think that
any like interview questions that you got?
if I wasn't a realtor, now that I know everything I know, I think you nailed it with the first two.
Hmm.
Have you like first off, have you like done transactions before, or is this like your first time? I agree with that. I'd also just want to understand too, like, what does this process look like for me? And have them explain to you at a high level what you can expect. And if that
Hmm.
person can succinctly explain to you what this looks like, how they work with their clients, I think that is a huge green flag there as well too. If you're
I
getting if they start explaining what the process looks like and it's you feel like overwhelmed and you're like I don't really know what this person is saying, that's probably indicative of what the rest of the transaction is going to be like as you're
yeah.
negotiating big pieces. Is I didn't even understand you when you told me how we're going to do this whole thing, and now we're negotiating a $20,000 roof. I
Yeah.
definitely don't understand you. So I think those are just like feel them out, feel out how their communication is, and do you understand what they're saying? Do they put it in layman's terms? And do you have that level of trust with them from that conversation too?
Yeah. I meant that to be my number one tip is like, can they explain the process in 2 sentences to 3 sentences? And if you have questions about one of those processes, can they tell you succinctly, like, this is how we're going to do it. This is how I do it. If their first response is like, hey, how does buying a home work? And they say, well, you pick out houses and then I go show them to you and we write offers. Like, there's a little bit more that goes into this, as you guys all know that follow this podcast. It's not
Yeah.
just like, it's usually not home buyer led. It's like, you guys have to know what you want, and it's our job to guide you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love it. I think we covered a lot here. You know,
Mhm.
we covered a lot. Um, I think the another main thing I like to talk about with clients too is the market right now. You kind of nailed this when you mentioned it, but the clients that are winning are the clients that have their ducks in a row, that are
Mhm.
prepared and educated and feel confident about what they're doing. And I think a lot of that is our job as realtors to instill that confidence and that education on them of what happens. And I think one of the biggest reasons why people are fearful to make moves or make decisions is because they don't have all the information, and that
Yep.
scares them. And our job is to give you the education that you need. And if it still scares you, that's okay, you know. But like our job is
Mhm.
to help you to feel good about whatever decision you make. We're in a
Yeah. You're.
market where you got to move quick. Good homes don't last. Homes that aren't priced well sit for a while. And you kind of nailed this when you said we're not seeing 5 homes in a weekend and we're deciding between your favorite 3. We're more getting everything prepared for you. We're doing a test drive. We're doing like practice tours in a sense to help you really refine what you want and what you don't want. And then more or less, we're then being very strategic about the homes that we're going to see because we don't have a lot of inventory. compared to where we should. We're waiting for that right home to pop up to strike. And that's kind of the method that we get into is exactly that. And in order to strike and strike well, you got to be sure you feel good and confident and have everything lined up to go.
Definitely. Let's kind of like wrap this up with number one home buying tip for 2026 from each of us. I'll kick us off
Yeah.
so that I can give you a second here, but my number one 2026 home buying tip is it's always great as a realtor to have your client reach out to you and you start the conversations like, hey, we're really reaching out because so and so introduced us to you. We saw this home last weekend and that was like perfect. If this popped up again, we would be all over that. What do we need to do to be ready next time? What we can do as realtors that's really helpful and I provide when somebody's like, hey, I'm looking at Shorewood and it's going to be a 3-bed, 2-bath, and we have like this budget. Can you just pull me a list of the homes that sold in Shorewood the last 2 years in that criteria so we can just like search through them to see how often does that pop up? That way you can see like, okay, the home that looked like this pops up like once every other month. When it comes up, it's number one priority. We got to go. And I think that helps a lot with like the fear of missing out of like, is this really the one after you've seen, okay, there's always another option, but also this option is a really good fit for us. So
Yeah.
that's my number one tip is get that list. If you haven't been window shopping and like seeing that it doesn't pop up frequently, get that list from your realtor of like the last 2 years in my buy box, sit down, bottle of wine, beer, Friday, like do your window shopping for the last year or two and get yourself caught up of how realistic is it and how often does it pop up.
I love that. I think it's such a good tip because it also lets you know that more things are coming, but also like if you miss one, like it's okay. And it just, I love that tip so much, man. I actually just had a client reach out to me and was like, hey, can you kind of send us how many homes fit our criteria in Tosa and Shorewood, then break it down by bed and bath count? And I'm like, yeah, and he's like, okay, this is great. Like I now have a really good understanding of we're going to have more luck in Tosa versus Shorewood. But if like it's everything you just said, I think is critical.
It's the my search heat map, which I've always done, but also I've found that not just showing them the high level heat map of where we're most likely to find it, but like here's every house and the pictures because Wisconsin is like a closed system state where you can't necessarily just go to Zillow and look at all the sales ever and see all the photos. Like you need access to MLS. So get that information.
Mm-hmm. Cool. If I had one tip for a buyer, I think it's having a really strong why for why you want to do this. A little bit more philosophical than anything. Not like something tangible, but I think, you may end up writing 2, 3, 4 offers and be getting crushed. And that sucks when that happens. And I think it's really important to remember why you're doing this and having the conviction that it's going to work. I tell clients this, that if you want to buy a house, I don't think I've ever had a client not be able to buy a house that I've worked with. And so it might not be on the exact timeline you'd like. We might need to have some thicker skin at times. And I know this is kind of sounding depressing as I say it, but I think that's really important to know is that the market is tough. And as a buyer, you've got to have just an understanding that it's going to be okay. It's going to work. If it happens, it will. And I feel like every client I've ever worked with is always the one that they get. They're always the most excited and happiest for too. So it always works out.
Yep. I agree. And it's a rule of average. When you have a process and a system like what we take all our clients through, you start to find these consistencies of you go on 8 to 12 home tours because you start getting picky towards the end once you figure out what you want. And you write about 2 to 4 offers. Like if you know going in, that's what it's going to take, you're going to be more prepared for when you kind of hit those bumps and bruises along the way. But knowing that you're going to learn from every home you tour and take something away, and you're going to learn and take something away from each offer you write, because that's a part of the process is I'm looking in Tosa and Shorewood, these beds, these bats, you're seeing the same buyers again and again. How does your agent have a process to follow through and give you back the insight so you can be successful in a predictable amount of time?
Yeah, I love it, man.
Yeah. Well, I think we got this all, bundled up here for how to buy a home and get ready to buy a home here in 2026. A little bit of like anecdotes, what's going on in our market versus the nationwide. I think some of like the 4 high level steps you can kind of start knocking out and building your team, and also the hot tips here from you and I. But if you don't have anything else to add,
no, that's it, man.
Awesome. Well, everybody, thanks again for joining us here today. Follow, subscribe, share this episode with somebody that needs it, and we'll be back again shortly with your Milwaukee real estate market update.
Bye, guys.
Bye.